Let's talk about Rhino first. So
Okay.
we're gonna play on Heroic today,
Heroic
which is like
1.
the internet challenge mode of the game where it's essentially the same as Expert, except that we will draw an additional encounter card than normal every turn.
Right.
And it's very hard.
Mhm.
You know, the deck that I'll be playing today is like 4 cards different than a deck that I've been just jamming against Rhino Heroic for 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
I successfully beat it on Heroic 3 finally.
Solo.
I'm not solo.
One-handed
right?
or two-handed?
What do you mean two-handed?
Well, some people do two-handed solo where they play 2 heroes.
Oh no, just one-handed.
Just one-handed. So pure solo.
Right. Just Strange versus Rhino. I tried playing Strange Spider-Man versus Rhino because you can actually like go literal infinite, but Heroic doesn't give you the time to set that up. I have not come close on Heroic 4 yet. I've tried a few times, but it's just too much. So on Heroic 1, I think that we will be successful. It's very doable, but it is much more difficult in ways that you don't expect it to be, I guess. I mean, if you actually break down your head, it makes a lot of sense why, but like it's, you think if I draw 2 cards, it's twice as hard. Well, that's not entirely true. It's actually more than twice as hard because the game is an RNG machine where this pile has a bunch of bad stuff in it, but like some of it isn't as bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you play regular mode, you flip 1 card for boost and 1 card for encounter, 50-50, I hit one that's good for me, one that's better than me, or one that's bad for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when you really break down the pile, there are ones that you can't hit to win. There are ones that you don't want to hit. There are ones that you always want to hit. And it's kind of like a roguelike video game almost, where you just like do runs until you get the RNG you want.
Sure.
But as you flip more cards, so if I'm just going 50-50 in single player regular, where I have 1 boost, where this card's text essentially doesn't matter except for the boost icons, and then 1 encounter card, and this is the card that really gets me, there's like 50-50 that's good or bad. But if I'm flipping 2, I have a much higher chance of hitting the one I don't want to hit of these 3. Or on Heroic 3, I have many more chances to hit the bad text.
Well, this would be 2, so you'd actually go 1 more up on 3.
So,
right? Yeah.
So this is what I beat. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
We'll talk about some of the card choices in my pile, specifically when we go over to the deck. But today we'll be playing Heroic 1 2-player, which is going to give us a situation of 4 encounter cards and 2 that are essentially milled for boost. And obviously that's not exact because sometimes the things will make an attack and you'll mill additional boost.
Right.
But there is a probability that we will have an unwinnable pile here just based on how the cards come up.
Sure.
Which I think is very, very rare in regular mode that you hit an unwinnable stack.
Sure.
But in Heroic, it can happen quite often.
All right, so let's talk about the decks then, because normally when we do our Sunday Fun Day streams, we randomize our hero aspects and the villain and the side scheme. So the only thing we randomized today was the side scheme, which we ended up with Legions of Hydra, which will probably make things a little more difficult.
Right. Specifically, one of the things that can get you really behind in Heroic is minions because they're permanent. So they don't just get you the turn. Like they essentially don't do anything the turn they come into play. But then you have to remember that they're going to like do stuff for however many following turns that is going to happen in the game. And even like a scheme 1 is enough to break this really fast in this mode. And the Legions of Hydra has added 4 copies of 1 scheme 2 attack 4 health guards to the pile.
Okay, so you're playing Doctor Strange. We featured a Doctor Strange Justice deck a couple of weeks back, but this is not Justice, right?
No. So this is essentially 4 cards different than the deck that I beat Heroic 3 with.
Okay.
And it's just some stuff that I wanted to try out on a lower difficulty, and also 1 card that I think is better in 2-player than it is in 1-player. but it might be a card I continue to play anyway. So I'm going to assume that if you're watching and you're enjoying this, that you already know what Strange does, and what the 15 Strange cards are. If you don't, just go on the website and check them out. Important things to note are he has 2 copies of a reasonable attack spell and 2 copies of a quite good thwarting spell in his pile. So I don't have anything like that from basics or protection that I'm playing. I'm just relying on the Strange cards to actually do the game-winning actions, because I have to play them anyway, and I don't want to clog my deck up with more copies of redundancy like that.
Right.
On top of his like invocation pile that again has a good attack spell, a good thwarting spell, and some other stuff going on that we'll talk about as the game progresses. So
absolutely,
that's my pile of Strange cards. Here are the 2 protection cards that I am playing, and these are the only aspect cards I'm playing. So Black Widow is the best card for playing Heroic.
Yep.
She is insane.
I agree.
Because she has Interrupt that you can exhaust her to discard a mental resource and like counter an encounter card and draw a new one. So as we were talking about like which ones are good and bad for you, she can stop the ones that are really bad for you. So she's very good, and it doesn't give her a consequential damage to do that. So she just sits in play after you play her, and she can really help you hit that good RNG to win the Heroic.
Absolutely.
The one I added, this is one of the cards that's different from the deck that I was playing, is the Night Nurse. This is a very powerful card because it removes negative conditions, confused, and stunned.
Yep, tough, those kinds of things.
And Rhino actually does a lot of stunning of the heroes.
Okay.
So especially in 2-player where I can hit your guys with this, it's even better. I think it'll be good.
Yep.
The rest of the deck is resources and good cards, which essentially, you know, describes every card game ever. So I have the set of all the doubles.
Right.
Genius, Strength, and Energy. That's easy.
Yep.
I have a Nick Fury.
Yep.
I have a Mockingbird. This is one that I don't play in solo.
Okay.
But Stunning Rhino is very good because his attacks are quite strong.
Sure.
He has like a +3 attack attachment he gets sometimes. The Sorcerer Supreme, you should play in every Strange deck.
Yep.
It is a basic, and maybe someday they'll make another Mystic that you can attach it to, but having +1 hand size is great. I have a single Endurance. I still think this, we talked about this last week, I still think it's the best heal card because it gives you some permanent value after the fact.
Yep.
This is a card I'm trying out. It's Espionage.
Okay.
This is a card I absolutely love. It came out in the Black Widow set,
right,
and it is insane card advantage. But you have to have a spy character.
Right.
There are only 2 spy characters in my pile. There's the Black Widow and the Nick Fury. But if you can stick this, it can sit and play forever, and you can do it whenever you want. You just, like, the turn you play Fury, or the turn you, like, if you keep your Black Widow in play for a while, like, you'll be able to play it probably. Otherwise, you'll just discard it as a resource. This is a deck where I'm not playing multiple copies of the Helicarrier or Avengers Mansion. All 3 of these cards are really good, and you should play them. Quinn Carrier specifically, you have to have an Avengers starter.
Right.
But again, is great.
So does Quinn Carrier, because it's unique, can only one player have a Quinn Carrier in play?
I don't know that.
Because Nick Fury's that way, right? He's a unique.
That's probably true.
So we probably should make an adjustment to my deck then.
Well, I mean, I can cut the Quinn Carrier too.
I'll cut it.
So
I'll cut it for another Helicarrier.
And then I have the full set of 9 enhanced resources. This is a card that, like, as I've been playing more, I just count all these as the same card because they're all essentially the same thing except that they make different resource types. I become more and more impressed with these the more I play them. Just because in this game, having a card in hand or having a resource to spend are very similar. And if you really think about it that way, this is like 2 mana draw 3 over the course of 3 turns.
Right.
And when they run out, but it doesn't matter because they don't go back in your pile unless you decide to sack them to something.
Correct.
so they don't
So
gum
don't
up your
clog your
deck.
deck, right.
It's just good. And Resourceful is a card that is similar, though obviously not as good because you do have to sack it to make the resource. It has a slight added benefit in the Strange pile because Magic Blast has a special effect when you hit a wild.
Right.
This is the only wild besides the Power of Protection that I could play.
Right.
And since I only have 2 green cards, I'm not going to play Power of Protection. So that's the whole deck. It's literally just like 20 resource cards and the Strange cards.
So you're basically trying to live off of the 17, like the 2 protection cards and the Strange cards to get you where you need to go.
Right, and the protection cards specifically like don't actually advance the board state. They just like defend losing.
Right.
So the way that you win in solo playing a deck like this, the version that I played in solo, the cards that were different were I didn't have the Endurance, I didn't have the Night Nurse, I didn't have I'm trying to remember the other ones. I didn't have the Espionage, and I didn't have the something else. I don't remember. But I had 2 copies of Warning and 2 copies of Emergency, which are 0 action, and one of them, when threat would go on a scheme, you do 1 less, and one of them is when you'd take damage, you do 1 less, just because you need to like protect yourself from losing a lot.
Sure.
I think it'll be less so in this mode when there's 2 of us, especially when you're playing leadership to have blockers and stuff that'll need that kind of thing.
Right.
But in general, you're on a real swift clock, and even that 1 point difference is enough to stop you from losing a lot of times.
Sure.
Because in solo mode, this starts at 0, it gets 1 every turn, and only has to get to 7 for you to lose.
Right.
And that's pretty quick.
Yeah. And it's only gonna be 7 here in this mode too. Like it's the same amount of like villain turns.
It's 7 per player.
7 per player, right? So it's 14, and we're gonna get 2 around now because of 2 players. So,
right? Yeah. It's the same number of turns. But
well, obviously, it's interesting because this is a deck where if they print too many more basics, you could get to a point where you literally didn't have to put an aspect in. But I think the rules still require you to pick an aspect and play an aspect card. I think that's.
Do you have to play this one? Like when I originally started trying to beat the Heroic 3, I wasn't playing any. I was just playing basics because I had the Mockingbird instead of the. Mockingbird was the 4th card I'm not playing in solo. I had the Mockingbird instead of the Widow. But essentially because you need to stop the encounter cards that are really bad, like the Widow is just a good choice.
Right.
Strange has two copies of a card in his 15 that just negate an encounter, like negate a treachery.
Sure. So a very similar sort of protection setup to even Spider-Man in that sense, because Spider-Man's got cards that are like Get Behind Me and stuff like. I think Get Behind Me is a protection card.
Yeah, it's a protection card. But yeah, it's like that. Like it just Strange's is like the best one.
Right.
And he's also just insanely powerful, just without taking into account the other things. So I think it's a good place to start. I tried to do it as Hulk and just rush it down with the +10 attack thing, but you can't. Like you just get 1 stun or 1 tough on Rhino and then you lose.